One of the pre-movement assessments that we want to do is the functional movement screen. The functional movement screen was created by Gray Cook and Lee Burton and a team of individuals around them. And it was composed of 7 tests: a squat, a hurdle step, an inline lunge, shoulder mobility, active straight leg, trunk stability push-up, and rotary stability. We're going to go through each of those and show you a way that you can self-assess yourself on each of these assessments. Now, this self-assessment is going to be a ballpark for you, and it's going to allow you to become more aware of your strengths and your limits in particular. And again, the beauty of this functional movement screen is that we're not testing one joint, one strength around one joint. We're testing whole body movement ability. So for example, on the squat motion, you're carrying a stick overhead, so you have to keep your arms extended and overhead, go through a full range of motion in control, and get back out of it. So it's a whole movement pattern. And you're going to see that similarly in all of these exercises. Just a little bit more about it though. What the test can tell us, or screen, again this is a screen, a test gives you outcome data. A screen gives us information that tells us a little bit more about a situation. So for example, blood pressure, it gives you an outcome, but that outcome doesn't say, oh, you have cardiovascular disease or you don't. It just says right now your blood pressure is this. If it's high, it's an indication that you should check it out, do something about it. If it's really low, same thing. So that's, a screen is a quick method of figuring out if we have some problems. And so that's why this particular screen is such a good idea. And again, why it was developed by that group, because it is a quick way of telling if we have movement problems. So this is what we can learn, this is what you can learn from doing this assessment. First off, for every one of these assessments, the getting into the starting position is critical. And so in order to, as we score it, you see, to get a 1, to have a poor performance, we can't sustain starting position. So we lose starting position as soon as we start to do the activity. So if it was a squatting motion, I would lose my ability to keep my feet parallel, for example, or to keep the stick overhead, or to keep my heels on the ground. That would mean that I would have a 1. A 2 means that I can sustain the starting position, but I can't do all of the movement goals. So for example, in the squat, we're going into a really deep squat here. So something about our ability to move into that motion to the fullest capability is limited. But we can sustain our starting position, and it's pretty good. A 3 means that we can do full starting position, and we can accomplish all of the movement goals. So very high, quality movement pattern. If we have any pain during the movement, not discomfort, but pain, something that we can point to, something that is sharp and very uncomfortable, and we don't want to be there. If we have pain in the motion, we stop the motion and we note pain. This tells us that we need to be dealing with that movement pattern before we load it. So we have pain, we need to take care of pain before we load it. If we can't sustain starting position, we have to re-educate the neuromuscular system so that we can eventually load it. If we're at a pretty good starting point, we can start to load those movement patterns, but need to be aware of whatever it was that was missing there. Not that we need to get that, but that's telling us that there is a limited range of motion. So this functional movement screen, this scoring system, is going to allow us to pinpoint some of our problems and become more aware of them. It's not like we're going to say, oh, you have a bad squat, we're going to fix your squat. It's more about, we have a few limitations. So if you end up with all 3s, you're good to go, whatever you're doing is fine. If you end up with all 2s, you're pretty solid and ready to start a program. If you end up with any 1s, or if you end up with any imbalances, like a 1 on one side, a 3 on the other side, then we know we have to correct something. So it adds credence to us going back and doing a re-education program. So that's all we're trying to do, is to show you where you have limitations. If you have pain, to work underneath the pain, and in certain cases to get help for the pain. You've got to deal with that. We can't be loading pain. And if you have some good function, it just tells us that you can move forward with it. So again, that's the functional movement screen and the scoring system that we'll be using.